I think the whole pool of players for sure. I mean, there's no real fair way to even go the other route with doing a separate draft with the vets and then going with rookies. Um, I mean, how could that be fair to like an owner that has the first pick and then all of a sudden they have the last pick in the rookie draft and then I don't know, it just doesn't make sense to me at all. Like I don't know why you would want to do that as a startup, but some people, I mean, I've done a few startups already, and people were trying to get us to go with, the separate draft, and it just didn't make any sense how it would be fair for all the other owners.
Well, I think okay. First off, I think that there's two time frames where you do one or the other. If you're doing your draft before the NFL rookie draft, then you need to have them separated. And the way we've always done it is you include the draft picks in the draft. So you include the 101 in that draft, whether it's an auction or a snake, and whoever drafts that pick then gets that slot in the first rookie draft. Anytime
Yeah,
we've done a draft, a startup draft, after the NFL rookie draft has completed, we always include the players in there and don't do picks separate from that. But you, I would never do where you have a separate rookie draft and then you randomize that list for a snake order or whatever. I would always include those picks in that initial draft so that people give value towards those picks and take them where they
yeah,
want them. I would never ever do a snake rookie draft in that first initial startup for sure. There's no way.
yeah. That's what I meant. Like, it just doesn't make sense at all. But yeah, with the auction, it totally makes sense because of the value. People will want those picks.
So for the next point, um, what are your guys' preferences, and then what are the strengths of the two different types of drafts that we see most often, which are the snake startup and the auction startup? Which do you prefer? And then after that, we'll go through some of the different strategies that you take going into each of those types of drafts. Anthony, why don't you start us off on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I prefer Snake mostly because I think it's just a little bit easier and I understand the logic between with the auctions, and it's more fair in a sense where anyone has a chance to get any player they want if they bid the right amount of dollars. But in the same sense, I think Snake is fair because I've never ended I've personally never ended a dynasty draft that was a snake draft and thought, oh, it's too bad, this guy drafted 12th. Look how bad his team is. Or it's too bad this guy drafted 6th. Look how bad his team is. Ultimately, I think it just comes down to people drafting the right people. And I think you can achieve that just fine in a snake draft. So I think snakes drafts, it's faster. I think it's easier. I think it's just as fair. So it's definitely what I personally prefer. But that doesn't mean I don't like auction. Auction, I think, is tougher, and I think it is, in some ways more fair. But I just personally I'm just used to snake, and I think that I just prefer doing snake drafts myself.
Jason, what are your thoughts?
I'm the same way. I mean, I prefer Snake. That's the way I started playing, and this is my first year of doing auctions. And overall, I had a blast doing it. It was an awesome experience, and I mean, I might have overpaid for a few players here and there, but I mean, I got the guy I wanted, so that's what it's all about. I mean, both ways are good. So
I It was only 1 or 2 seasons ago I did my first auction. I will never snake again. I think auctions are far superior to snake drafts. Um, I think that there's still sniping and there's still all that. I don't think either's unfair. I just think that auctions are far superior. They're far more fun, um, and while there is sniping in both, and sniping in a snake is okay. The guy right in front of you took the player that you had pulled up in your queue. In auction, it's okay. Well, we have a 12-hour timer, and they decide to take out your bid with like 10 minutes to go in auction or something.
Right.
So that part of it's actually a little more frustrating because you thought you had that player for 11 hours and 50 minutes, and then boom, they're gone. But I think that it's far more fun, and that's my ultimate goal with anything. I obviously I want to win. It's become a lot harder since I've started sharing all my opinions with everybody that's in all the leagues. But the main thing is to have fun and to enjoy what we're doing. So auctions is far more fun for me. But going into a snake draft, do you have a specific strategy that you're looking to implement when you start that draft, Jason?
Well, obviously I'm gonna pick the best player available, no matter where I'm at and what slot or whatever. But yeah, I just draft for talent and who I think's gonna get the target share and who's gonna dominate, and yeah, just pick the best player.
Anthony.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I'm a big believer of best player available as well. Although I will say, sometimes
We're gonna get deeper into that
you're,
in the BPA segment, so don't give too much
okay.
away.
Well, I will say on the other kind of part of your question, sometimes when you start a draft, I don't know how my team's going to look at the beginning. I don't know if I'm picking like in the mid first of a startup draft, I don't know if Zeke's going to fall to me or not, or I don't know if Thomas is going to slip to me or not. So my team is going to look a lot different just based after my first pick, and it's going to change probably based on who I got before a little bit. So it's hard to know exactly how my team's going to look. Also if I'm drafting and I end up in the first round with let's say DeAndre Hopkins and Leonard Fournette, let's say I got Julio Jones. I'm looking at my team like, well, I'm gonna go for it this year. I'm not gonna worry about all this youth. I can win this thing right now. So sometimes it kind of just depends on how the draft goes. But before I really decide, what I'm going to do.
Yeah, that's the only thing that I would say is that I try to remain fluid, right? Because you don't know who's going to be where, and it doesn't matter if you're talking snake or auction. You don't know what price somebody's going to go for. If a couple players go for more than what we think they should, then that ends up changing values of everybody else in that auction draft. And
Right.
that's why it's so hard for people to find like auction value charts and whatnot, is because they're very dependent on what's the budget that you've got to start that draft, what is the roster size in that draft, and how many teams are in the draft, right? So if you have 30 players per roster, each player's value is going to be different than if there's 25 players per roster and 12 teams for each, because less players are going to get rostered. So, I tell people don't ever go in saying I gotta get a running back in the first round, I gotta get a wide receiver in the second round. Go in knowing that you don't know what's gonna happen. We don't know half the shit
Right.
that we think we know. Every draft is different, which is why drafting in fantasy football is the most fun part of the whole thing. Um, Go in and say I'm going to put the best team together, and that doesn't matter if you end up taking running back in the first 3 rounds. If the value's there, the value's there. If it's wide receiver in the first 4 rounds, if the value's there, the value's there. Don't force other positions just to do that, and we're going to get more into that with our BPA segment here in a minute. But speaking on that, win now versus youth. I think Anthony did say it best there with, as your draft progresses, you're going to kind of see um, trend with your team, which way you're going. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to go like full old guys. If you're in win now, you can win with rookies on your team, but you may prioritize when you have players that are similar values, where one looks like they're probably going to produce for maybe the next year or two, versus the guy that may take a year or two but has that same startup value. Um, you may take that veteran in that segment of the draft to help the win now part of your team. Jason, what are your thoughts on win now versus youth movement in your startup draft?
I mean, yeah, I'm gonna go for the win every year. I'm here to win. When I'm playing in my leagues, I'm trying to win no matter what. And later on, like if your team's not as good and you take last or whatever, then it might be time to rebuild and go with the youth movement. Of course, rookies are nice to have, and you want some youth on your team, but I want to win, so I want the proven veterans and the guys that are going to get the ball. So.
Yeah, I switch it up. Sometimes I'm building teams that I'm looking to try to build to win for consecutive years and whatnot. And I like the different. I'm in so many leagues though. If you I don't know how many leagues you guys are in, but if you're not in a lot of leagues and you're probably trying to win now and get your money made now, if I did that, I would have the same players in every league. And then I'm rooting for, which is nice in a sense, because then you're never rooting against players. But now I've just got a whole pool of players that I'm basically rooting for every player in the NFL on every play, and it's gonna go well for some of my teams and bad for some of my other teams. So it's a unique thing, but that comes with playing in a lot of leagues plus DFS on Sundays. So that's fun. Trading picks, I'm torn on this, right? Because it's so hard when you don't know who's going to be landing where. To trade one pick for for a couple rounds later or whatever, it could work out great, but it could also come back to bite you if the players you like get drafted ahead of where you think they're going to get drafted. Projecting that stuff can be really tricky. But Jason, what are your thoughts on trading picks, and what are some things that you implement to make sure that you don't get hosed on the deal on the back end?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to trade early and often whenever I'm in my drafts. So as I try to target like probably the top 75 at least, trying to get up there. I try not to trade, my upcoming pick. So like I'll try to package like, let's say a second and a fourth, to move up into the first, something like that along those lines. Kind of depends on what's happening in the draft, but that's kind of my strategy is just not trade my upcoming pick. So I'm trying to move up, but not give up that other asset too. So.
Gotcha, Anthony.
Well, the first thing I just want to add in there, if you're new, if you haven't done startup dynasty drafts, I would strongly recommend not trading in a startup, because one bad trade in a startup is going to destroy your team for literally years to come. If you mess this up, like it's all bad. So of course, if you're watching this, if you're doing a startup, find me in the Facebook group, tag me. I'm happy to review any trade at any time. So if you guys are doing a startup and you want me to give you some input on that, feel free. But when I'm doing startups, when I'm doing drafts, I love doing trades. I agree with what Jason said. I try not to give kind of too much, especially the pick coming right back up. But sometimes we'll get into some other strategies later. But a lot of times I'll wait for a quarterback. But as soon as I see like, hey, I got to get this guy right now, that's when I'll move up and make sure to get my guy. Because I like to try to look at the draft board, look at the other teams, kind of guess when I'm going to have to make that move. And it kind of just adds a whole other element to it. I don't think I do trades that are monster trades that can be too risky. But if I'm picking like on a snake in the end of the second round, and someone wants to move up and they want to give me like a third and a fourth or a third and a fifth, I mean, I've done trades like that before and take a little bit of a risk, knowing that even if it blows up in my face, it's really not a giant deal. But yeah, I mean, I look for value all the time, and a lot of times when you trade back just a few spots, you end up getting the guy you wanted anyway. So as long as you're smart about it, you plan it out, look at everything, I think it can really be beneficial.
Yeah, if I'm moving back like let's say a half a round, what I'll do is I'll look at all the players that are available and I'll take my let's say it's 6 to 8 spots. I'll take and I'll list my top 6 to 8 players, however many spots that is, and I'll say, okay, well if I get any of these guys instead, am I happy with what I get in addition to that? And if the answer is yes, then I'll do it. If the answer is no, then I'm probably not going to do it unless I'm fairly certain that one of those guys is going to fall because somebody else is going to get pushed in there. But you're kind of playing a guessing game at that point, and I would rather not be guessing. I would rather have a solidified deal like this rookie class. In those drafts, and I treat those the same way. Um, I was listing out 6 rookies, and I'm like, okay, well if I move from the 7th spot to the 12th spot and I get this guy plus whatever I'm getting in bonus, am I happy with that? And most of the time in this draft, it was a yes, but you don't always know that. And especially in startups with a lot of us where we'll have guys ranked 40 to 50, and maybe 3 of those guys we really like. And then you're in that situation where you're like, okay, well, what if it's one of the other 7 that I have to take? Am I really going to be happy with this trade? You really got to ask yourself that. So, getting into actual like draft strategy, the one thing that I would say for everybody is make a list. If your league is drafting 300 total players, list out your top 300 players and go by your list. Tier it out though. If there's breaks where okay, these 5 players I really like about the same amount, tier them out. If there's guys in the same tier, because we're gonna get into this in the next segment. If they're in the same tier, you can take whatever position you need, right? Because you're not taking one player that's worse over a player that you have higher simply based on position. And this is where you get into best player available. And I think all 3 of us are big proponents of best player available, right? But that doesn't mean that it's always cut and dry. You're going to have guys that are at, a wide receiver and a running back that you have valued the same. You can take positional needs at that point. But if you have a guy a tier ahead and he's a running back, but you need a wide receiver and there's one in the tier below, you should still take that running back. You're going to have a strength at that position, and you can make trades later that benefit you more when somebody else needs a running back, or vice versa if it's wide receiver that is your strength. Just do not like overdraft players simply based on your need for a position. You can work all that out. That's the fun thing about Dynasty is that you have ample time. And even in redraft, like let other people be the impatient ones that overpay for stuff, and that could mean they're overpaying you after the draft for positions that you have a strength that they have a need at. And if you're the last guy that's willing to budge, you're going to get the best deal possible. So big proponent for BPA. Anthony, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I like what you said about making the list. And this goes for redraft too. Just make a list. And a lot of times when I was starting out, like I've been playing fantasy for 20 years, but when I was starting out with dynasty leagues, just maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I wouldn't have my own list. And let's just use a more modern example, because like a couple years ago, or let's say last year, like Le'Veon Bell, right? I mean, he was slipping in a lot of startup drafts last year, Bell. And, if I didn't make my own list, I would have thought, man, this is great value here. I'm just going to take the great value, but based on these other things, even though I wasn't really too high on him, it's like, well, look at, this sheet says it's great value, so I'm going to do it. I just can't pass up on that. But in my heart, like, I didn't really feel good about it. You know what I mean? And that's just an example of something that you can do wrong. So I really do think you should make a list, get your players out, and then that way you can just stick to it. And even if you start a draft with 5 wide receivers, even if you start a draft with 3-4 running backs, as long as you think the value's there, you'll be able to trade those players later. You'll be able to find other running backs you can plug in later, like a Tariq Cohen, Boston Scott. I mean, there's other guys out there. So even if you start a draft one position really heavy, it's okay to do that. Go for the best player, take the value. You'll be able to flip other guys later to build out your team.
What are your thoughts there, Jason?
Oh, I think you guys hit it on the head. Just pick your best player and worry about needs later. Especially in a super flex, you can hoard quarterbacks if you need to. Someone's always going to want quarterbacks, and let's say you don't get the guys you want, or you're weak at the running back position. But if you have 4 or 5 quarterbacks that are startable, you can easily trade for a running back or 2. And just, work your way up, find your guys, and yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, now speaking on, you mentioned Superflex. Now, when we're in a 1 QB or in a 1 tight end, this is a debate that goes on and on and on and on about where should these players be taken, right? Because there is what I call positional scarcity um, when it comes to running backs and wide receivers, right? You have a limited amount that can actually change the face of your team. And when you're drafting quarterbacks and tight ends in the top 3 to 6 rounds, you're losing opportunities to get those players that can actually transform your team from a loser to a winner. And I see somebody asking me on Facebook. I can't see the name. It's just telling me Facebook user asking me if my article is out yet. It is not. I'm still working on it. It is like it's like writing code for a program with all the information that I have to decipher from. But I will work on getting that completed. We've been working hard to get these 4 streams going for Monday through Thursday. But yes, but where are you guys willing to take that first quarterback or tight end? Because I look at those, kind of the same. You've got the few guys at the top tier that are difference makers, and then everybody else from like 6 to 20 are a minute difference, right? They're not making a difference on your roster. The point difference between those guys is 1 or 2 points, whereas at other positions like running back and wide receiver, there's a huge gap between the startable guys and then your 5th and 6th wide receivers and whatnot. Jason, where are you willing to take that first quarterback?
In like a super flex,
no, in
or
a,
just
in a,
the
in a
one
one
quarterback?
because they don't have that in Superflex.
That's true. Yeah. So basically, I'm willing to wait unless I'm gonna get a guy like Pat or Lamar. So those are usually my 2 top targets, and if I don't get those guys, then I'm gonna wait no matter what. I mean, Kyler Murray's another guy up there just because of the value of Dynasty and the youth. I think he's an up and coming player that's gonna be great. He's gonna be up there with those guys. So I mean, if I can't get any of those guys, or like maybe a Russ,
So you're saying you're willing to take a guy in the 3rd round if he's there?
Oh, absolutely. If it's a Pat or a Lamar, yeah, I'll do it.
Anthony, what about you?
There is no quarterback that I would take within the first 3 rounds. Personally, I wouldn't do it. I mean, I understand the argument for Mahomes or Lamar, but personally, there's no chance. There's so much late quarterback value in every startup that I've done that I can't do it. And a lot of people a couple years ago were taking Baker Mayfield. I know, Jason, you mentioned Kyler Murray. A lot of people were saying the same thing about Baker Mayfield, a couple seasons ago. oh yeah, well if it's Baker, I'll get Baker. I'm thinking of another guy. I'll get Baker. Okay, we'll have that go for you. So no, quarterback, I'd wait forever.
Baker's only been one season, so let's be fair there. It was one down season.
Okay.
Sophomore slump, maybe.
All right.
So let's be fair there. Let's not write Baker off like he can't be valuable.
All right. But for tight end,
we're on quarterback
there is only
right now.
One tight end. Oh, we're just on quarterback
right now. There's no way in hell I'm taking a guy in the third round. Like, this is what I try to tell people, and they asked about the article that I'm putting together. The one thing that people forget is that there's a minute, the difference between those quarterbacks is nice between that first tier, but what you don't get is the difference that a top 6 wide receiver makes in a league, or a top 6 running back makes in a league. There's no way to get that value from a quarterback. You're not going to get that. The difference just isn't big enough between the great quarterbacks and the good quarterbacks. You're talking great, right, with Lamar and Mahomes.
Yep.
The difference is, like, they're the only two that you'd probably consider great at this time, right? Because one of them averaged 25, 26 points per game, and then the other one averaged like 28 in the last 2 seasons. But the difference is between them and then the Russ Wilsons and the Kyler Murrays and those guys that you're talking about. Whereas when you talk about a great receiver like a Michael Thomas or DeAndre Hopkins to a good receiver, you're talking about like a Stephon Diggs who's very inconsistent, or some would say like an Amari Cooper who's very inconsistent. Whereas at the quarterback position, your good quarterbacks are still consistent producers on a week-to-week basis. And then value-wise, it's just the youth, but we're seeing guys play into 42 years old right now, 40-plus years old. So it's so hard for me to pay that price when I know there's guys that we've taken in the third round at running back and receiver that have ended up top 6 at their position and made a huge difference for your team. Whereas at the quarterback position in 1 QB, it's just hard for it to make that big of a difference. I feel the same way about tight end. But what I always tell people is I'm willing to overdraft these guys in rookie drafts and wait for them to get to that point where they're top 3 round value, right? Like if you can get, in 1 QB, the Kyler Murrays or the Joe Burrows in the second round, at the top end of the second round, then take that shot. If you lose a second round pick, you lose a second round pick. These guys don't go in the first round very often. But if they pan out and they end up like the Lamars and those guys, then they'll still have that top 3, top 4 value for you, but you got them cheap. And I'm the same way with tight ends. Like I'll overdraft tight ends all the time in my rookie drafts. But if they hit, think about this. 2 years ago, Kittle and Trey Burton were the same price in startup drafts. Right. They were both being drafted in the 90s, right? And that was a year after Kittle had experience. You could have got him in the third round of your rookie drafts. Get him at that value.
I drafted Mark Andrews in the 4th.
Yeah. And
one of my leagues, yeah.
And why draft them in the startup when it's costing you an opportunity at a guy that can be, top 6 at receiver or running back, when you can just draft a shit ton of them. Draft them all the time in your rookie drafts, and you're going to hit on one. So that's kind of my theory between both. I mean, the quarterbacks score about twice as much as the tight ends, right? But it's like the same thing. You've got the 3 to 5 guys that are difference makers, and then everybody else is like so close that, the positions are really treated the same until you get into your tight end premiums and your super flex and 2 QB leagues, and then that changes a little bit. But yeah, that's my theory with the quarterbacks, and I will get this article out so everybody can read that. Any more thoughts on that, Anthony?
No. I mean, I agree with waiting on quarterbacks. I mean, there's so much value. I mean, now, we're talking about Baker. Baker, I mean, he was going like where Kyler Murray is now in startups, and now you can get Baker where Darnold's going. You know what I mean? So, Why take Kyler, for example, in the 4th, 5th round when it's very possible by next year in a startup he'll have an 11th, 12th round value. So it's just I don't see the benefit to taking a quarterback early myself, especially when you can get Aaron Rodgers for almost nothing. I mean, in comparison to these other guys.
No, I completely agree with that, except for I don't think there's any way that Kyler Murray drops that far. I think Baker got unlucky with his coach and everything else that happened in Cleveland last year. But yeah, I mean, and that goes for anybody though. I mean, any wide receiver you draft in the 3rd round can drop to the 10th round the following year. But yeah, we will answer questions. So if you got any more, drop them in the chat, and we will get to them as soon as we are done with this main segment. The last little thing we have is overall draft strategy, and we've already talked about it a little bit. And I don't know if there's anything else that we really need to hit on it, but the one thing that I'll just tell everybody, and I'll keep saying it, be able to adjust when you're in your draft, right? Stuff's not going to go your way. Don't freak out when you look and you see, okay, well, I need to start, 2 running backs and I have 2 flex spots, but I only have 1 running back right now. Like, unless you're drafting like the week before the season, like you've got time to work that out. Most of my drafts I get done right after the NFL draft so that we have an off season full to do it. This year's a little bit different, obviously with COVID, but don't hamstring yourself into thinking, well, I have to fill this right now. You can always make those trades, and that's another fun part of Dynasty. That's why a lot of us play it, because it's always active, and you can make trades anytime. Just be fluid with the way you're drafting. Jason, any last thoughts on draft strategies or anything like that?
Yeah, just early, get your guy. In the mid rounds, get your proven guys, up and coming players. The youth, and then later on in the draft, you're taking your flyers on guys that you believe can do something and become something. So that's kind of my strategy.
Anthony.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think I tend to build younger teams. In the early rounds, I'm not looking for anyone over the age of 29, 30. I'm looking for younger players. It's just how I tend to do it. That gives me a little bit more flexibility if I get to the mid part of the draft to say, well, this is good value for Landry, or this is great value for Marvin Jones. This is a part of the late draft where I could get some vets now if I went really young earlier. So I tend to go younger early, and then to kind of be a little bit more fluid as the draft goes to kind of see how it kind of works out. But I agree with Jason. Just be fluid, and then take your late picks. To take those guys in the later rounds, some flyers, guys with upside, guys that you think could really be worth a lot more in a season or two, and then you could then trade them for value in the future.
Yeah, one thing that I always do when I get to where I have okay, there's 2 players that I really like, I try to be honest and say, okay, which one has the highest upside? And then if I think one has a huge upside over the other guy, then I'm probably taking him, unless it just happens to be that the one guy's got a really safe floor. So, for example, a couple years ago, Cooper Kupp and Kenny Galladay were both later round picks that were rookies at the same time. I thought Kenny Galladay probably had a higher ceiling, but his floor was really, really low, where I thought Cooper Kupp was a really safe player. In that sense, I took Cooper Kupp because I thought there was no way that I was going to lose value on where I was getting him, and he had some decent upside. But Kenny Galladay was the guy that could potentially be the wide receiver 1. We've obviously seen Cooper Kupp's upside was a little bit higher than I even anticipated. I didn't see him as wide receiver 4 overall. I just thought he was a safe PPR player. But those types of things, you have to be prepared for them. You you have to know about the player, right? You can't just be looking at two guys and going, well, I don't really know about either of them, so I'm just gonna pick one. Like make sure you get your studying in. Drafts are about being the most knowledgeable guy in the draft, and you're not always gonna be able to be that guy. But if you put in your work, you're never gonna be in a spot where I'm like, well, I don't know who these guys are. You don't want to be that. You don't want to be that guy in your draft, because then they're just drafting off of names that they know, and you're missing out on guys, and you don't want to be the guy doing that. So, all right.
Yeah, and like age, keep in mind keep in mind the players' ages. Understand if you're going to take John Brown, hey, he's 30. Don't Robert Woods, 27, 28. Like you got to know how old these guys are, and then also contracts. Have an idea as to how long they're going to be on a team for, or may not be on a team for. The best example that comes to mind is Kareem Hunt. Yeah, he's behind Chubb, but he's a free agent next year. Is he going to re-sign with the Browns? Probably not. So he's certainly someone to target. He's only 25. He got a year off, right? Or maybe, yeah, about a year off. So certainly just keep age in mind, and then also keep the contracts in mind as well when you're going through these drafts.
Okay, I'm going to start with this question. And first, I just want to tell everybody, like, if you're listening, you're watching, make sure you like, subscribe, wherever you are. If you're on YouTube, hit that notification bell. As I said, we are going to be live Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays with different shows. Monday night is IDP. Tuesday is Dynasty. Wednesday is Redraft. And Thursday is Devi. And then DFS live streams will be coming later in July, getting you ready for that 2020 season and prep. So make sure you hit that like, subscribe, notification bell. But this first question ties right into what we're doing. Who are you targeting late in drafts? And Jason, we'll go ahead and ask you first.
Like specifically,
do you have any late draft darlings that you've been looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I'll target the running backs first are my main priority. If there's a guy just sitting there, I mean, I don't know exactly. I want just the best guys with upside.
You don't have any names of players late that you've been targeting this year?
I'd say probably Darwin Thompson, but I mean he's more of a flyer kind of thing.
Well, that's who most of our late round guys are.
Yeah, I mean
we don't have any like superstar names to drop at you for late round.
Yeah, no, I mean there's guys like that, and there's plenty of opportunity there for but I don't know exactly of
Anthony.
I like to target the running backs.
Running backs late. Anthony, what about you?
Running backs.
Yeah, I mean, I typically go for like the wide receivers with some like crazy
Let's
upside.
Get us some names.
So like Russell Gage is a guy that I've been getting in a lot of my drafts this year.
Gage.
I love Russell Gage. I think he's in a good spot. Sanu's not there anymore. Hooper's not there anymore. There's a lot of targets available. I know. I think Sully wrote an article on him and talked about all that. So that's something to keep an eye out for when you're doing a draft. Russell Gage is my guy. I also like Boston Scott. I think Scott's in a nice spot there behind Sanders. The Eagles really haven't added any running back depth in the offseason. I think they were rumored to get.
You gotta make these shorter, bud. We can't have a full description on each. We're running out of time.
Okay, well, and then if you don't get too late in the draft, but Tariq Cohen is someone I'm kind of eyeing in the mid to late part of drafts as well.
Myself, Devin Funchess is my biggest target late in drafts. Obviously missed the season, but now in Green Bay, like him. Darwin Thompson's another one I think people are sleeping on. Middle part of the draft, like Cohen, Anthony Miller. Those guys that were highly touted in the Bears offense that now actually get a quarterback in 2020. Let's see. Yeah, I think those are the three main guys that I've been looking at. I want Darwin Thompson everywhere because I'm not a CEH fan. So
Well,
this time last year,
you
everybody
said
was high on Darwin Thompson, and all of a sudden the dude didn't even play. Like, he didn't suck, he just didn't play, and now everybody's down on him. So he's almost free.
well,
So
Rick,
one of the guys I'd want to target would be, Hayden Hurst. He's gonna have a big opportunity. He's going to, great situation for him.
He's too expensive.
And then Jalen Hurd. Yeah, some people are kind of sleeping on him still though. But another guy is Jalen Hurd. Especially with the Debo news, I think he's gonna have an opportunity, and he looked good in the preseason last year. So
I can get down with that one. I like Isaiah Coulter too from Houston, on that team where everybody gets hurt all the time. So that dude could be the only healthy guy by week 4, and get what was that kid's name from Philly last year that stepped in? Greg Ward.
Greg
he
Ward,
could be in the Greg Ward position with the teammates that he's got there in Houston. So I like him. Cootie hasn't been healthy at all. Brandon Cooks, head injuries. Will Fuller, leg injuries. And our boy Cobb, has had some issues in his career. So that dude could just be the only one alive by week 5. So yeah, he's another guy I've been swooping up. Steven Sims worth a hold? Yes, no, Anthony.
I mean, any player is worth a hold. It depends on who you're going to get in return. I mean, I'd rather hold Des Bryant over Yoik Bell. So it kind of just depends on who you're dropping. But it's hard for me to answer that just straight up. But anyone's really worth a hold. I mean, anyone could really come out of nowhere.
I completely disagree that anyone's worth a hold. I will just say that. Jason, what's your thoughts on Sims?
I wouldn't necessarily hold him by any means. He's playing for Washington, so anything can really happen there. They got McLaurin, and then who? It's like there could be opportunity for him, but I wouldn't necessarily go out of my way to hold on to him. But in the other sense, you're not going to get anything for him. So
right.
Overall, I think he's just taking up roster space. Yeah, so that's what I would say. I don't believe anything. I don't believe he's going to ever be anything. I'm not going out of my way, but if there's nothing better on the waiver wire, then keep him. Or if somebody else is excited about him, throw him in as a toss-in on a trade and try to get a little extra value. Okay. Emmett says, I traded DJ Moore for Denzel Mims, a first, second, and third in 2021 rookie draft, and a first, second, fourth in 2022. Did I win or lose this trade? Okay, so he traded DJ Moore away. He got Denzel Mims, 2 firsts, 2 seconds, a third in 2021, and a fourth in 2022. I say you smash this deal. I like DJ Moore, but you're basically getting 2 firsts, 3 seconds, because Denzel Mims went in the second this year, and then a third and a fourth over the next 2 seasons. The only problem is now you have to wait for that value and hope that Denzel Mims hits. But with, I don't think DJ Moore is worth much more than 2 firsts, right? He's not a 3 first player yet. So really, if you would have got the 2 firsts, it wouldn't have been a bad trade for you, I don't think, other than the waiting aspect. So with what else you got, I think you won this deal. But it'll suck if DJ Moore ends up a top 3 wide receiver in 2020 while you're waiting to draft those other guys. And now you just got to hope that dude's team sucks for 2 years and make those picks better. Jason, what do you think?
I think it's a steal. I'm really high on Moore too, so it's like that'd be hard to give him up, but for that value you're getting in return, it's totally worth it. I also think Mims is going to be really good. So he's got a profile that is comparable to Julio Jones. So anything could really happen.
Oh my!
You never know.
Don't say that type of stuff on the stream.
That's a hot take right there.
I'm not a Mims fan at all. There's something about him that I just don't like. I don't even know what it is. There's just something I feel is missing. Anthony, what's your deal?
Yeah, I mean, I would do that trade. I like DJ Moore, but you said it's like getting 2 firsts in a few seconds. I have Mims as first round value, late first round value. It's like 3 firsts, 2. I mean, even if Mims gets gaced, you still have 2 firsts to fall back on, a couple seconds. I mean, I don't think you can lose that value. So yeah, I think it's a good trade for sure. I mean, you could flip, if you wanted to, you could trade for Mims and all that. Even if you don't like Mims, you could flip Mims in a first and get Cooper Kupp, and then you still end up with a first and 2 seconds and everything else. So I think it's a good deal.
Somebody on Facebook said, when I'm looking at startups in Dynasty, it's difficult because how can I gauge how long the league will last until league fatigue? Is this a 3, 5, or everlasting league? Should Dynasty leagues have mandatory contracts to stay in a league in order to not alter draft strategy? To answer that question, you can't have contracts. You've got 12 guys. What I recommend is find a community like ours, RotoHeat. If you're already in the Facebook group or on the Facebook page, you're always going to be able to fill those spots, right? You're not gonna. There's no way to ensure that all 12 guys last in a league. But if you have a good commissioner, somebody that is willing to adapt to what's going on, and listen to the league, like that's what I always try to do is ask my league mates, what do you guys want? How can we make this league the most fun for everybody? And it's not just my decisions going in everything. Sometimes, yes, I do have to make the decision because we can't come to an agreement. But overall, I'm trying to have the leagues built around what the people in the league want, right? It's their money that is going in. That'll help keep the league together longer if everybody enjoys what's going on. But for draft strategy, I mean, I'm not the guy that's going, oh, well, if I draft a quarterback, I get to keep him for 10 years. Well, who the hell cares? Because you don't know what's going to happen in 10 years. And I would put money on the fact that you're going to trade them within 10 years anyway. Because if I look at my teams from 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they're nothing close to what they are now. So quit looking too far ahead. I look 2 to 3 years ahead. What can I do in this 2 to 3 year period? If I think I can win, then I'll take the guy. If not, then, we're on to the next. But fortunately for me, I've not had any leagues fold. My longest league's been running, that I started, has been running since 2005. I'm in one league that's been running since 1991. And they started off getting the New York Times and taking the box scores and manually doing the points and mailing them to the commissioner. Literally mailed them, not emailed them, mailed them to the league mates every Tuesday. So you're never going to be able to tell. Just pick a window that you want to value your guys in and do that. Any thoughts on that, Anthony?
No, I 100% agree with everything you said. 100%.
First time ever. Mark
people,
it down.
yeah,
June
no,
30th,
really though. I mean,
June 30th, 2020. Anthony agreed with me. We like it.
I mean, 100%. Like people look like 5-10 years. Oh yeah, I got to get Mahomes because he's going to be my quarterback for 15 years. Like, dude, like, are you kidding me? Like, 15 years.
I don't even know if I'll be alive in 15 years.
Might be that
guy. Yeah. But yeah, so I 100% agree with you. You look 2-3 years out. That's why people don't want to draft Julio. It's like, you know what? I think he's going to be good for 3 years. I don't have any issue drafting. I'm not going to take him within the first 3 rounds, but if he's sitting there in the late third or early fourth, I have no issue with that at all.
Jason, any more thoughts on that?
Oh, I mean, yeah, you want longevity in your league. So I mean, there's rules that you can implement. Like some leagues will do, like, if you trade your first round pick, you got to pay the next year and stuff like that. That almost guarantees, like, the guys are gonna keep playing and be invested, and they won't just completely trash their team just to try to win now. So there's ways to keep guys around, but yeah, things happen, life happens, and guys move on. But there's ways to get guys to fill an orphan team too. So I mean, it's not the end of the world if someone doesn't want to continue on. And they completely bombshell their team. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Jaws Whedon says, I'm deciding on rookie draft tiers between Moss and Dillon, and then the later tier, which is he has Darrington Evans, Antonio Gibson, and Joshua Kelly. I'm not sure exactly what his question is, but I would say I'm drafted Darrington Evans and probably Antonio Gibson both ahead of Zach Moss. Moss might not even make it to my draft because he's so slow. Um, but AJ Dillon, I think, is being slept on. You're gonna have to wait a little bit for his production, but I think that he could end up being a monster in Green Bay. So I think he's a tier ahead of the other guys, and then Moss is in that second tier, and I would still take Darrington Evans and Antonio Gibson ahead of him. Not a Kelly fan myself. Jason, any thoughts on that? Because I already know Anthony likes Moss, so.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of Darrington Evans. I mean, he's gonna be good. So he's right behind Henry, but Henry could be gone next year. You never know.
Evans could still catch
And
60 passes this year, though.
Yeah, I was gonna say he could be a great satellite back for you just coming into the league. So let's see what happens.
Anthony, why don't you talk up your boy Moss here real quick? Make it fast though, because we're running out of time.
I'll make it just as fast as Zach Moss when he burst through the hole. No, I have Zach Moss the highest of any of our other rankers. I think.
Yeah, there's a reason
and
you're wrong.
I think he has the best chance to be the lead back this year. Now, I don't think he's going to be.
Best chance out of who?
But of all these guys, he can be the lead back by the end of this year, because I don't think Singletary is elite. So we're these other guys we're talking about, AJ Dillon and Aaron Jones, not going to happen. Darrington Evans and Derrick Henry, it's not going to happen. But Zach Moss is in an opportunity where he can gain a lot of value by the end of this year, and so I think that should be baked into his value on these rookie drafts and on these startup drafts, and should be someone that you guys should be targeting.
Here's the thing: is Darrington Evans doesn't need 200 rushing attempts to be valuable. He's in a position where he could catch 60 to 80 passes, like legit, in that offense. They don't throw downfield a shit ton, and they wanted Deion Lewis to do this, but he couldn't. Darrington Evans, I think, has just as much of a chance to be valuable this year as Zach Moss does, and he's playing in a spot where there's literally nobody to take touches from him for what he does as his strength, whereas Zach Moss has Devin Singletary there, and Devin Singletary is a better pass catcher and a better runner than he is. Neither of them are super fast, but Zach Moss just might not make it to Washington by the time the season starts. CXK says I'm sleeping on Moss mode. I may be, and I could be wrong. I've been wrong before, but I watch this guy and I'm like, there's nothing that excites me about watching Zach Moss. It's just, I think he could be a guy like a LeGarrette Blount that punches it in, but they've also got Singletary and Diggs and Brown and Josh Allen that are, guys that are dangerous in the red zone, and people are high on Dawson Knox. I'm not, but people are high on Dawson Knox if he ends up being a red zone threat as a tight end. I don't see a lot getting around to him. I think he's like 8th in line on that team. I can't get excited. Does Adrian Peterson hold any value this season, Jason?
I mean, absolutely he does. He's still grinding. He's still got it, but I mean, you got Darius Geis in there too, so that's the main guy to worry about. But his health is, been up and down. He showed flashes, and I don't know. I'm a big fan of AP just because he's, he started his career in Minnesota, and I'm a Minnesota guy, and he's chasing that record. I mean, there's a reason why he's still playing. So I think he's going to get opportunities here and there, but I mean, he might not be, a fantasy asset by any means, but he could start here and there. But I mean, I wouldn't rely on him by any means. So
Anthony.
Yeah, I mean, Adrian Peterson just said, I think about a week ago, he wants to play 4 more years. Now, I think that's probably not going to happen. But, I mean, as of right now, who else is on that backfield? I mean, you got Darius Geis, haven't been able to stay healthy. Bryce Love, so
Antonio Gibson.
I think, but I still think that Adrian Peterson has a chance to, be in the mix, kind of like we've seen Frank Gore kind of be in
Frank
the
Gore
mix.
hasn't had fantasy value in 7 years, though. He's just been the guy that
No.
carries the ball for 3 yards every carry and doesn't score you any points because he doesn't catch the ball either. The answer is no.
Yeah, but
You're not starting Adrian Peterson unless he starts catching the ball at like 50 years old or whatever he is. Like he's rosterable, but he's not a guy that you're going to put in your lineup. Come on, you're not starting Adrian Peterson.
More of an emergency.
No, but
okay. His question is
scarcity.
Does AP hold any value? If he does, you need to trade him to the person that values him.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. I mean, I think that he's rosterable, and I think if you're desperate, you could start him. Maybe depends on what happens.
Look at he's rolling his eyes at himself. That tells you everything you need to know. Just AP's over, okay? AP's over.
Oh man,
he has no value if Guy stays healthy. Bryce Love is gonna take reps. They moved Gibson to running back because they don't like their running back position. It's Washington too. Just get over the AP. Like, the dude's great. He was great early in his career, and he's probably going to be a nuisance and take from more talented guys at this point, like Gore does, because Gore still sticks around. But you can't. You're not starting the dude. And if you do, your team's in trouble, so there's no value to it. Like, you should just start somebody that is going to score 0, so you get a better spot. So trade him. Get him off your team.
I would try to trade him to the Geis owner. I mean, that's what I would try to do. Yeah.
Okay, one last question. We're already over time here. Our opinion on Hayden Hurst trade value, Dynasty, Superflex, 2 tight end. I can't believe people are arguing AP versus Gore right now. Like, both of them are done. Just forget about them. Get somebody else on your roster. Okay, Hayden Hurst trade value.
Disrespect.
I don't know. It is disrespect. I don't care. Like, what are you doing? Like, why are we talking AP and Gore right now? Like, no. If we're talking about like greatest running backs of all time, let's talk about it. I'm yelling at you, Jay. I'm yelling at you. Your tights are too short and it's cutting off circulation to your brain. I can't do this. I can't argue Adrian Peterson in 2020 right now. I can't. I think this dude was around when I was in high school.
4 more years. 4 more years.
Dude, I mean, if you're playing in the standard league, that's different, right? If you're playing in PPR leagues, you better not be starting Adrian Peterson or your team's in trouble. He doesn't catch passes. He's not going to help you. It's not going to be good for your team if you have to start him in 2020 in a PPR format. If it's standard, then that's different because he doesn't need those passes. Okay, Hayden Hurst for our boy CXK. He's been our most loyal watcher since we started. Hayden Hurst, what do you think his value is? 2 tight end. I honestly have no idea. I think he's overvalued no matter where he's at. But I don't have any 2 tight end leagues to give sound advice here. Jason, do you have any?
I mean, I guess you could, give up a late round first, early second kind of value, but I'm really high on Hayden Hurst. I mean, watching film on him, and I see, defensive backs and safeties, making a business decision. Like they want nothing to do with him when he was coming through there, but that's just me. And I think Matt Ryan's going to be targeting him a lot. And I mean, there's really not much besides, Julio and Calvin. So I think he's going to be, the third option.
Shots fired at Russell Gage.
Yeah. There's nothing else there.
Anthony, Hayden Hurst value.
Well, I don't know. I'm not too high on him. I like the spot, but I'm not convinced yet that he's gonna, like, a lot of people think, oh yeah, Hayden Hurst is gonna be the new Hooper just because he's going to that same team, but it doesn't really work that way. So it's kind of hard because I like to give two answers, so then I'm always right. But I would say I'd fade him. I would trade him at this point because I think his value is too high.
So where would you guys rank him? And this is a number, not a full like paragraph answer. Where would you rank him in tight ends, Jason?
I have him in the top 10 this year.
Anthony?
I'd say about 15.
About 15. Okay, so let's just get this right. Okay, top 10. 10th and 15th are about the same at the tight end position. That can't be argued. Like maybe a half a point difference in scoring to a half point to a point. The only way that he is worth what he's getting, what people are getting for him right now, is if he is a top 4 tight end and he is a tier ahead of that second tier of tight ends. That's the only way that he's as valuable as what people are getting and paying for him right now. That's what we talked about at the tight end position, right? Tight end 6 to tight end 15, the difference is minute. And when it costs so much more, when you could get, an Eric Ebron cheap or something that's going to put up probably similar numbers. He has to do what Hooper did to make his current price worth it for me. And I think that's what people forget a lot at the tight end and quarterback positions, right? Ranked 8th to 15th, not that different. I do think he's better than people give him credit for in Baltimore because obviously Mark Andrews, but I can't pay what people were wanting Hooper prices when this guy hasn't done that before just because Hooper did it in Atlanta, and I can't do that.
That's right.
I can't do that. But he is kind of all over the place with people paying for him. All right, that is going to end the first episode of our 3rd season. We will be back every Tuesday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Rob Silvers will be with us normally on Tuesday nights as well. Wednesday night tomorrow, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Our redraft boys are going to be talking players that have changed teams in the offseason and how that's going to affect their 2020 seasons, plus the people that are around them. So make sure you tune in at 9:30 p.m. Eastern for the Fantasy Inferno show. Thursday night, the Devi Hour, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. And then Monday nights, IDP HeatSeekers, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. So 4 nights a week right now. DFS will be starting up on Fridays here before long, so make sure to do that. Make sure to follow Jason over on Twitter and Instagram at RotoHeatJabled. Anthony doesn't like Twitter, but you can find him over running the RotoHeat TikTok. Just search RotoHeat on TikTok and you can see his videos that he's making over there. Make sure you tell him, make more, make more, make more. We need more, Anthony. Not 2-week breaks in between. Get some consistency rolling there. Make sure to watch. We're dropping player outlook videos on the daily right now, all the way up to the season. We've got a bunch of players in line. And make sure to hit that like, subscribe. Don't live in Illinois. I live in Indiana. We have Anthony in California. We have Jason in Minnesota. So we're all over the place. Not in Illinois. I just happen to be a Chicago fan. I'm about 3 hours from Illinois, though. But if you go about 2 hours from where I'm at, they're on Central Time. But yes, Eastern Time, 9:30, daily throughout the week. Any last words, Anthony?
No, I think that's all. I appreciate everything we did tonight. I think people doing startups are going to be very helpful if they watch this. So
also,
I'm happy to help out.
I'm creeped out by it just tells me Facebook user. I don't know who it is, but they didn't ask if I lived in Illinois. They said, you live in Illinois. It's a little creepy. I've had somebody impersonating me on Facebook over the last week, so kind of creeping me out there. Jason, any last words?
No, just thanks guys for having us, and thanks for your time and the questions and the comments, and follow us on all the platforms, and join our Discord, join our Facebook community if you already aren't. It's a bunch of great guys, and we're always here to help you, so just ask questions. I'm also looking to start some startups. Dynasty. I'll be posting in the Facebook community and on Discord. So if you're looking to join a new league, I'm going to be starting a few here.
Good. Somebody else other
Soon,
than me
so.
can do it. Yes.
Yeah, I'll start running a few.
I like it. All right, everybody.
So let me know.
We will see